Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I figured I would make this video because I wanted to reflect, with this week being the 80-year anniversary of the official end of World War II. I thought I would take some time today to tell you about the World War II veterans I have known over the course of my lifetime. And, for any of you who may not know me, I am a big history buff, and World War II has always been a time period in world history and American history I've always enjoyed learning about, and the lead up to it and so forth. However, going back just over the course of my lifetime, being born in the 1990s, I was very blessed to be born at a time where it was where a lot of the World War II veterans were still living, and many of them, as of this recording in 2025, many of them are no longer with us. There are fewer and fewer as the days go by. However, there have been a few people over the years I've known who served in World War II, and those who were alive during World War II, and their stories have been really amazing to learn, just those firsthand accounts of the World War II years, Great Depression, just what really made that generation the greatest generation. The first person I want to highlight, and I have posted recordings a few years ago, some of his sermons and all on here, was Brother Floyd Sherman Hines Sr. He was in the Navy in World War II. He was born December 28th of 1920 and passed away August the 18th of 2007. He was 86 years old. He was in the Navy during World War II, and he and his brother Arvil were on the USS Helena on December 7th, 1941, when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. Brother Hines and his brother Arvil did what they could to fight back against the Japanese attack that day. Brother Hines' brother Arvil was killed during the battle, during the attack on Pearl Harbor. Brother Hines actually had to wipe his brother's brains off of the gun, and while he was shooting at the Japanese planes, at the Zeros, is just that intense of a battle. You may recall it from the Pearl Harbor movie, or from the Medal of Honor Rising Sun video game and other media, where the attack on Pearl Harbor is featured, and it really just shows you how intense that attack was. And Brother Hines, he continued to serve through World War II. He was on a couple of other ships. One of them was the Ranger, and I forget off the top of my head the name of the other ship he was on, but he was in the South Pacific. There was one time whenever he and his shipmates, they had ran out of rations, and they had captured a Japanese ship, and for one whole month all they had to eat was rice. And Brother Hines lost like nearly 30 pounds in that month of time, and he never ate another ounce of rice again in his life after that. After the war, he went on with life, and he got saved, accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. He and his wife Jake did in the early 1950s, and they had two children, Donna and Floyd Jr., who we all call Brother Bo. And Brother Hines, he was in the ministry. He preached the gospel of Jesus Christ for over 50 years. He was the minister who led me to Christ. whenever he was pastor at Westside Baptist Church in Jacksonville, Arkansas, back when I was a kid. Due to his health, he had to retire in 2003. However, we did keep in contact with him and always tried to see him as much as we could because he was my family's pastor, even after he had to stop being the pastor of Westside. And he wound up coming down with congestive heart failure and passed away in '07, as I mentioned earlier. And it has been researched, and they do believe that PTSD issues and all can lead to heart diseases like congestive heart failure. Brother Hines had three brothers who served in Patton's army, and then his sister, Miss Hazel Hild, she was our song leader at Westside years ago, but she used to tell me stories as well, and she was busy raising her children during World War II, so she wasn't like one of the Rosie the Riveters or anything like that. But one thing that always stood out to her in her memory was, with all the rationing that was going on during World War II, for breakfast, a lot of times instead of like eating bacon and sausage, they would eat bologna. So it's really interesting how those memories stick with people. And I had another friend, she was a phone pal of mine. Her name was Doretha Shipman, but her husband, who had passed away by the time I had met her, he had worked on military artillery during World War II, but Doretha had actually been one of the Rosie the Riveters. She had worked at the ordnance plant that they had in Jacksonville, Arkansas during World War II, and now that's a site of the Arkansas Military Museum there in Jacksonville, Museum of Military History. And Doretha, she went on to be with the Lord back in 2017. Then Miss Hazel Hild, she went on to be with the Lord back in 2016. She was actually the last of Brother Hines' siblings who had passed away. But I'd met Doretha through one of my best friends, Robert Powers, who I've featured a lot. Some of the old Camp Yorktown Bay videos on this channel, and his stepdad, Warren Waddell, served in World War II. And the Battle of Guadalcanal was one of the big major battles he was in. I never knew Warren Waddell, but I always enjoyed hearing about him. Same as my great-grandfather, Troy Thompson, my maternal grandfather's dad. My nanny and Paw and my mom all told me stories about great grandpa Thompson. I never knew him because he died when my mom was a little girl, so I never knew him. And he was with the Arkansas Private Army. He was over in Europe, and Italy was the major part of his service during the war. But some other individuals I knew who were in World War II, a couple of them I volunteered with at the Clinton Library a few years ago. Mr. Leon Marks was one of them. He was actually in the Air Corps during World War II, and he was primarily stateside, and he was a Jewish man, and after the war he was really involved with Jewish veterans group, and he also was an eye doctor for many years, and he came to Arkansas. He and his wife did back in the 90s to be close to their kids and grandkids. But Leon, he actually lived to be 100 years old. He passed away in May of 2021. He had turned 100 in April of 2021. But Leon, it was always neat hearing him talk about what life was like growing up during the 20s and 30s, and being in World War II. And another individual, the other one who I volunteered with at the Clinton Library, really became like a surrogate great grandfather to me, and that was Mr. John Lemoy Jones. And Lemoy Jones, like Brother Hines, was in the United States Navy. However, Lemoy, he was in the Atlantic. He actually was involved in the D-Day landings. D-Day landings, excuse me. He was on the USS John Frank Ford. He was on that Navy destroyer on June 6, 1944, and it really helped out with shelling the beaches to help the troops with the invasion of Normandy. We're all familiar, those of us who have watched Saving Private Ryan or play like Medal of Honor, Frontline, or some other World War II games about the war in Europe, recall the levels, where you are involved in the D-Day landings and, the opening of Saving Private Ryan. It was a very intense battle, and it is something that, will forever be remembered as one of the greatest military operations of all time from World War II and the last century. But Lemoy, after he got out of the Navy after World War II, he wound up teaching some. He worked for Firestone Tire and Rubber. He really lived a remarkable life. He was in his late 90s when he died. He would have been 100 this coming December, and he passed away a couple of years ago, this past July. But he and his wife were really nice people, and his family members I was able to meet. But Lemoy was actually recognized as a Volunteer of the Year at the Clinton Library. And at my first volunteer gala at the Clinton Library, it fell on Lemoy's birthday, and President Clinton wished Lemoy happy birthday in his address to us that evening. And so that was really neat. And President Clinton really said it best in his address to Lemoy about how he served at a time back when we knew who the bad guys were, and how right President Clinton was on those remarks. But a couple other World War II veterans I have known is Raymond Crissy. He actually was a friend of my father's. They had worked together some back in the 80s, and they used to go to swap meets for automobiles back then, traveling all over the United States. But Raymond Cressy, he was in the Pacific he got into the war effort and all like towards the end of the Second World War. And then afterwards, he was involved with a lot of the atomic bomb stuff. He wasn't involved with the Manhattan Project, but apparently, just reading through his obituary, he's involved with a lot of the stuff dealing with, like all the developments with the nuclear weapons and all. I'm sure there's a lot more to it than, I'll ever know, of course. But Raymond Cressy, what he did after the war, he wound up starting his own body shop, and he was a really good body man when it came to working on automobiles. He really made a good living for himself and his wife, and he was very successful. And the last individual I'll talk about before I close this video is the only World War II veteran I know as of this recording who is still living, and that is Mr. Jack Grimes. Now, Jack Grimes, he was in the Pacific as well during the Second World War, and I believe he was Navy too, like Raymond and Lemoy and Brother Hines, if I'm remembering correctly. But after the war, in 1950, Jack Grimes started the Capital Glass Company here in Arkansas, and Capital Glass Company this year is celebrating 25 years of being open. Jack Grimes' son, Glenn, and his grandson, Aaron, they're the ones who really run Capital Glass Company now. But my father, Gordon Hillman, has worked for Capital Glass for 35 years now, and it's amazing to see how a member of the greatest generation was able to get a business going that is still going strong in present times. And, I've always enjoyed my interactions with the greatest generation. I have met a couple other World War II veterans just in passing when I've been out and about, and other people who lived during World War II. And it's really very humbling to have had the honor of knowing these people, and especially with a lot of them having passed away now. Raymond Cressy, he passed away in 2017. I meant to mention that about Raymond Cressy. And his wife, Barbara was her name, she recently passed away back in June. So that is the latest on all the World War II veterans I have known, and a little information about them. It's just a good reflection video I wanted to do here, and just talking about the people I have had the honor of knowing who were in World War II. And I've had the honor of visiting the National World War II Museum in New Orleans while I was there a couple of months ago for the National Federation of the Blind convention, and that was an amazing museum, and perhaps one of the greatest museums I have ever visited. It started off as a museum dedicated to D-Day. However, they have just received so many artifacts and different items related to World War II that it's a museum about the entirety of World War II. And there's so much stuff there that you would have to spend more than a day there to see everything. I mean, I did not even get to see every little thing. However, I was able to see the major galleries they have: the Road to Berlin, the road to Tokyo, their Holocaust exhibit. I got to see some of the vehicles out on display, such as the boats that the troops on D-Day used to land on the beaches, which were made down in New Orleans. Also, the Holocaust Museum, what really stood out to me in that was they had a replica of the secret annex that Anne Frank and her family hid in for the 2 years they were in hiding, from 1942 until the Nazis discovered them in 1944. And I have had the honor of knowing a few Holocaust survivors. I've not had them like necessarily as best friends or like major key players in my life, like the individuals I've talked about who were in the U.S. military during World War II. However, I have met them at special events I've been to. Some of the events I've been to at the Clinton Library. I have been to the Holocaust Museum in Houston, Texas, and I was able to meet a lot of the Holocaust survivors I met were down at the Clinton Library, because we had Holocaust survivor Dr. Irene Butter, I believe is her name. She spoke a few years ago down there, and I tell you, I mean, that was very humbling as well, to meet individuals who survived just such a very horrible event in world history. And the Holocaust is something I hope and pray never happens again. And it's really just something that we need to be sure that people know that that did happen. I mean, because there are sadly people who want to deny that the Holocaust happened, and all the proof is there that it did happen. But hope you all have a blessed day, and if you do know anybody who was alive during World War II who is still living, even if they did not serve during World War II, if they were old enough to remember the war, collect their stories, talk to them, record them telling their stories, do something to preserve their recollections, because once they are gone, and we need to do all we can to preserve these recollections to keep their memory alive and make sure the next generations coming after us knows about the sacrifices that were made by the greatest generation to preserve our freedom and defend our freedom. Y'all take care. God bless you. And God bless these United States. Thank you.